So last weekend, I drove the youth group home from Wilpinette, Washington. I was about 364 miles. And the teenagers, I didn't realize he was going to go downstairs, but the teenagers helped me pass the time by asking me about every 20 minutes, "Are we there yet? Can we have more snacks?" We listen to some music, we tell some stories, 20 minutes, "Are we there yet?" At about the 4-hour mark, we kind of got a little hysterical. Vanessa began impersonating Gollum from Lord of the Rings, and Eli has a really wicked hillbilly accent. I don't know if you've heard it for a long period of time, and I began singing, "Leaving on a jet plane" at the top of my voice. But we made it. And we're all none worse for the wear. Are we there yet? How much longer? E.L. Doctorow says that writing is like driving at night in fog. You can only see as far as your headlights, but you can make the whole trip that way. And I think that's what it feels like right now for First Congregational to be church. Is that we've got some fog, some uncertainty, and we've got our headlights, and we're tempted to ask, are we there yet? I want like a green highway sign. I can imagine it, with the destinations. It's like, okay, interim pastor hire, 5 miles. Search committee byway, 40 miles. Port of new settled senior pastor, 249 miles. And we would feel so much better. It's like, okay, 249. Got it. In fact, you know how there's a smartphone alert system when there's slowdowns? I personally would do really well if I could just get a little pop-up on my phone, ding. Oh, church leadership transition delay due to unexpected conflict. At milepost 12. Use caution when sending email next 4 days. That would be so darn helpful. And this is why we do strategic planning. We literally call them roadmaps, right? Because we're human, and to be human is to be anxious about what happens next. But what I wonder is, even if we had those things, what are the right landmarks? What are the helpful landmarks? I can point to form and function. The arrival of a new settled pastor. To locate us in time and space. But that's only one dimension of who we are as a church. What about all the other dimensions? If I got to do a roadmap, I'm thinking of a puzzle that my family has. It's called Land of Happy Moo Cows. And there are all these little happy cows and chickens, and there's literally a cloud with the number 9 in it. And I would like the Land of Happy Moo Cows, whatever that is for us as a church. I want that to be one of our landmarks. And if I asked you, you would have your own things, right? You would have your own, I don't know, maybe it would be what the youth group is doing, or how many kids are here for kids' time, or our choir. We would all have our own things that we wanted to make sure to reach, and construction that we want to avoid. Are we there yet? How do we know when we've arrived as people, as individuals, as a church, as a community? Well, in our scripture today, the Apostle Paul is writing to a group of people that he knows well, and they're in a difficult time. If you didn't just finish reading the book of Philippians with me, then you may or may not remember that the people in Philippi were a really important community to Paul. And so when he's writing them and he talks about his love for them and how connected he is, it's because he went there because of a dream he had. He meant to go to Asia. Instead, he had this dream that this man from Macedonia, which is modern-day Greece, said, "Come visit us." And he went there and they met Lydia. Remember the story of Lydia, the merchant woman who was baptized. And then they healed a slave and were thrown in prison for it. This all happened in Philippi in the past. Now Paul is in prison again and he's writing to them. And they must be wondering if they're there yet or not. Because remember, the early believers really thought like this Jesus thing is going to happen like any minute now. He was just here. He'll be back. So Paul says, I am confident of this, that the one who began a good work among you will bring it to completion by the day of Jesus Christ. Paul is in prison. The people are wondering, what's happening next? Are we on the right path? And their leader from prison says, I'm trusting God on this. God has got us. God has got us. And that community at Philippi, they have got Paul. Because while he's in prison, they're financially supporting him. This is what the church meant. This is what it meant to be church. It meant you supported your folks who were in prison. You didn't just pray for them, but you sent money and you sent food, because otherwise they wouldn't have had either. And I love, as Larry read, Paul says, you hold me in your heart. You hold me in your heart. So as we're thinking about our journey as church and our roadmaps, I'm thinking about the ways that God has got us. And I'm wondering who we hold in our heart. Are we in solidarity with those in prison? Do we hold them in our heart? You know, we've had clergy who have been strategically arrested. We've been doing this campaign to free these men that are in Sheridan. And I have missed being with you, but I will be with you again this Tuesday. And what we're going to do this Tuesday is something different. We're actually going to tell stories. So, 121 men were detained, asylum seekers. 2 of them so far have been released. So that's how you know that this work is not in vain. Right? 2 of them have already been released. And they have gotten access to clergy. The Sikh men have been allowed to wear their turbans. And it's because of this campaign that Emerge is doing, and that I'm inviting you to continue to participate in. We did an action last Tuesday. Within 30 minutes of the action, 6 clergy were arrested. 30 minutes later, the ICE director called and said, okay, I'll meet with you with Emerge. This is why we do that work, right? Because it does matter. It does have an impact. And so we can't stop. I want you to be with me. I'll be there at 2 o'clock, but there'll be clergy there all day on Tuesday from 10 to 4, telling you the stories. We've been able to go meet with these men and hear, why were they forced to migrate? Why did they come to the U.S.? Knowing, right? I mean, why would you come knowing it's in all of the global headlines, the state of our country, and yet people still continue to come because of the threats that they're facing where they live. So I invite you to do that. And I'm inviting you in the middle of the sermon because I think that's spiritual practice. I think that's God work. We say God is on the side of the oppressed, right? Amen? We say the Holy One calls us to practice justice, to love peace. And so our action in the public sphere is not political, as in just for the sake of power, but it's worship. It's for the sake of our own souls, for the sake of our own ability to connect to God. Because if God is on the side of the oppressed, I just want to follow this through. If God is on the side of the oppressed, that's not me. How do I connect to God? I connect to God when I put myself where God is, in the place where God is, with the people who are fighting for their life. Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Paul trusts God for his community, and Paul prays for them that their love may overflow more and more with full insight. It's love with wisdom. It's one thing to practice peace from a distance, and I think sometimes, I asked us a month ago, is it politics that hold us together, or is it spirit? It's one thing to do politics that we do because we want to prove our goodness, or because we think our faith requires it, or it's a moral duty or an obligation. And it's another thing entirely to be compelled by love. Right? I can't say, let our people go, unless those are my people who are in Sheridan. Unless those are my people that make $10 a year in a country where they can't raise their grandchildren and they have to leave home to send money back through. We're skimming that money that's coming back, right, that Katie was just talking about. That money's ending up somehow back in me and in my standard of living. So when do I love? When do I actually claim all people on this planet? We say that's what we believe, that God loves every person. That means we all belong to one another. And I'm kind of preaching a little heavy-hearted, and I can feel that. It's hard to love, right? You're going to say, we can't love everybody. Oh my God. Make up your mind, Elizabeth. Immigration, Philippines, last week it was gun violence. Like, really? Pick one. Oh, but it's everything. Okay, so you pick the one for you. But to be church, we have to hold it. We have to hold the fullness of all suffering for the sake of all love and liberation. And yes, it's overwhelming, and we might want to let that buffer that's already built for us, it's so convenient, my privilege, my U.S. citizenship, I can let that be. I can do, they call bystander effect. Somebody else is going to do it. Are we there yet? But actually maybe that's the wrong question. Are we there yet? Because what's there? Is it perfect church? Is it land of happy moo cows? Maybe the question is, are we Jesus yet? Are we gospel yet? Are we love yet? That's what we're called to be. We're called to be Jesus. We're called to be kingdom of heaven. Love that compels us so that we cannot stop. Our body has to be where our heart is. All right, so I'm going to tell you a little story. And I'm a little nervous because I'm trusting God that somehow this story fits. And I'm trusting God that this is just my little life, right? Why is my life a story that the public should hear? But I'm up here not because I have clever ideas or new solutions. I'm up here because I love us and I believe in the work God's doing in us as First Congregation. Right? So with that, trust, I'm going to tell you about my grandfather. When I was really little, so this was my parents' daycare, was Oma and Opa's house. And they're German and from Germany, and they set up a little, we have one of these old clotheslines. It was like a pole, a single pole, and then it expands out. I mean, we have one of those? Okay, and then you hang all the clothes on it. So at the bottom of the pole, they piled a bunch of sand from the beach. And that was where I played. So underneath all the sheets and all the clothes, I'd do my sand. It was in the middle of the backyard. And my Opa, my grandfather, would be out puttering. He would garden, or he would go work in the garage. But he would come by every so often, 20 minutes maybe. He'd come by to the cafe, where I would serve sandwiches, or sand cakes, or kuchen. And he would eat my sandwiches, and he would say they were the most delicious that he had ever tasted. And then I got older, I don't know, 5 or 6, and I learned my family stories. And one of the most famous of the family stories in my family is about my Opa, and when he was a prisoner during the war. So he was in the Luftwaffe, in the Wehrmacht, under the Third Reich, fighting with the Germans, and he was captured by the Russians and taken to a camp. Actually, they were marched around to several. But shortly before the war ended, this is the story, they were going through a kind of routine medical inspection. And those who were fit were going to be sent off to the Gulag in Siberia. Nobody ever heard from those guys again. So they're in the line for medical inspection, and there are 2 lines. And my Opa notices the line he's in, the doctor, he recognizes. It's an SS officer who defected to Russia. So Opus switched lines for he called it the lady doctor, the Russian woman. And she fails him, he's in poor health. So he has to remain there at that camp. And within a few weeks, the Allies come and liberate the camp, and he goes home, and that's when my father, surprise baby, shows up. And so if it wasn't for the kindness of this Russian doctor in recognizing my grandfather's condition, my father would not have been born and I would not be here. So I grew up with this story. This kindness of this doctor saved my Opus life. Well, then I got older still, and I went to school and learned more about what it meant to be in the Wehrmacht, what it meant that World War II happened. I learned about the Holocaust. I was an exchange student. I walked through the iron gates of Buchenwald, and I went back, I still remember it, found my Opus picture. He had passed away by then. But I found a picture of him in his uniform, and I found the swastika on his chest. I owe my life to the kindness of strangers, and my family is on the wrong side of history. And all of us have stories about our complicity and our resistance. But here's what I want you to hear. Is that from the moment of finding that, through the rest of high school, through college, that's a place where I don't know what to do as the granddaughter of immigrants, as the first generation of my family born in this country, my family naturalized. And that's a great place for me to go to God. Because guilt doesn't help me. Shame, I don't know what to do with it. I can use what I have. And what I really long to know, I know how much I love my grandfather. How do I open my heart to strangers? What's the kindness that I might show? How might another person's life depend on my kindness in the place where I find myself in all of the complexity? And that's where the fullness of God in me shows up. It's when I don't know, and it's not clear, but I'm filled with longing that I could be of use and that God could meet me in all of my story. That God could meet me and finish my story. Because I know my family, right? There's so much of us. We have a story that's going to go on and on. If I'm lucky, I'm going to get grandkids out of that one. We'll see. But our story is going to go on, and I don't want God to write it. So I invite God into my uncertainty and into my longing, and I trust that God can use me with everything, with my holding back, with my maybe it'll be somebody else, with my hope, with my love. God can use me to complete the great work of peace. Question for me, maybe the question for you. Am I Jesus yet? That is going to take a really long time. Probably much longer than I'm going to be alive. And that's good news since I have chronic anxiety, because it means that I know where I'm headed. So if I have a freeway sign for Elizabeth, it says something like, Jesus, 4,000 miles. Well, at least I'm not lost. I'm on the right road. I will get there. We will get there. I know that we will. We will get there. Amen.